Saxons to be doing it. They don't want the Chinese to be doing it. They get the Chinese out of the way first. And then the Anglo-Saxons will inherit this new world with the other nations, the Asian nations, the African nations, the South American nations. Presumably, it is assumed that they won't have the resources to be able to handle the situation in any kind of a way that gives them the strength to recover after whatever it is that they think is going to occur. So there are several other parts of this which also fit, and one of the reasons why this is an important presentation to make personally, it's my own personal thoughts, because up until now I've been following a lot of the well-founded research on these sorts of agendas. We've had our own sources of information over the last 3 years. But I've always had questions in my mind, like, why would they do this? You know, war against China, why? Third World War, why? And suddenly, a lot of these things start to make a little bit more sense. It's possible, for example, that when we heard from Jordan Maxwell in our interview with him, which we did at the end of last year, 2009, he described to us how he had researched a number of repeating symbols and images that had been used ever since the time of Hitler, and even long before that, about the dawn of a new day. There's something very important in Masonic and Illuminati thinking about the dawn of a new day. And here we have possibly the reason for their belief that if you think about the possibility of a cataclysm, if they think this is really going to happen, the 2012 movie that many of you will have seen, after all of the flood and all of the earthquakes and tsunamis, then you've got these big ships sailing across a calm sea with the sun streaming through the clouds, and you've got the dawn of a new day, and the implication in that movie is that now those people will be able to rebuild the new earth because those are the survivors. It's the modern day Noah's Ark. It's possible that the dawn of the new day, that it refers to that. And it even occurred to me, and I'd be interested for other researchers to offer their views on this, that the very term the New World Order that we first started to hear about 20 years ago, actually longer ago than that, but the New World might be the post-cataclysmic world. The New World, it might be the order for the New World after the cataclysm. They may be planning who will inherit the New World. It may be nothing less than this. Maybe this is what the New World Order is all about. It really is the order, the plan for the new world that they think is coming. They think this is going to happen. Now, I say again, it's very, very important to differentiate out all of this information here. I don't believe this is going to happen at all, but they might be doing something crazy to try and safeguard what they believe is their own interests. This is what we need to be aware of here. And what I want to do is I want to just state really clearly why there are profound reasons for not believing that anything like this is going to happen. There are a lot of things that haven't happened which were intended to happen. Many of you will remember I think it was the 30th of August 2007, there was a B-52 bomber that flew halfway across America from Minot Air Force Base to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana with 6 armed nuclear cruise missiles on its wingtips, something that could never happen by accident. It was illegal, it should never have happened. You can't even smuggle a bullet out of the weapons storage area in an Air Force Base without there being a whole bunch of signatures and everybody knowing about it, let alone making the mistake of loading armed cruise missiles onto a B-52 bomber with nobody noticing it. There was a reason why that happened, and that was actually prevented from going any further. It stopped at Barksdale in Louisiana. Some very brave airmen blew the whistle on that, and they did their job, and they reported it up the line. It appeared very, very briefly in the mainstream media, and after that it was completely covered over, and everyone said it was a mistake. That was no mistake. There was a reason why they did that, and what many of you don't know is that At that same time, at the end of August, a group of anonymous investors bet $2 billion that the stock market would fall by 50% before the 21st of September 2007. They stood to gain $4.5 billion if their bet had succeeded. These were what are known as put options. And the insiders in the stock market, they call them bin Laden trades. It's a sort of ironic description because of the betting that took place around about 9/11. Okay, those people lost their bet. It didn't work. The plan didn't work. The stock market didn't fall. The bomber never went any further. And for all we know, that was intended to be the start of the Third World War. It never happened. Okay? We heard a few minutes ago, I was describing how Henry Deacon described that the war against China was meant to start in 2008. That didn't happen. A lot of people thought that was crazy. A lot of people thought he was crazy. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he heard something that was a real plan, but they're 2 years behind schedule, and maybe this will never happen at all. There are a number of other things that may have been planned and which have never transpired. It's very interesting to think about the so-called Mexican flu outbreak, the swine flu outbreak. For the last 6 to 9 months we've been looking at a scenario where it looked as if they wanted to roll out vaccinations, they wanted a lot of people to get ill, they wanted to announce a pandemic. Even now there have been proposals to extend this pandemic declaration for another 2 years, and nothing's happening. In England we call it a storm in a teacup. There's nothing happening here. But maybe something was intended. Now, if it wasn't intended, it's possible that all of that could have been some kind of a test, just to see how people respond, to see how people react, to see how quickly it spreads, to see what the take-up of the vaccinations will be. And then, of course, us at Project Camelot and a number of other people who've been activists in this whole area trying to draw attention to all of this, now we're all on a database. They know who's going to stand up and start talking about all of this stuff. So it might have been an experiment, or it could have been a failed rollout of something. There's plenty of reason to believe that things are changing. This is the important thing. And those of you who've been following the work of David Icke, this is an important perspective here, because we support his work fully, inasmuch as he makes a beautiful presentation and he starts off by saying, we are infinite consciousness. There are many ways to put this, but it's very hard to disagree with that. We're immortal, godlike beings who've long ago forgotten what our power was. The potential of consciousness is enormous. It's very important to realize that how powerful we are may be the single most important component in this whole picture that enables us to save the day. This may be what it's really all about. Admiral George Hoover, who died in 1998, he was in the Office of Naval Intelligence in the US Navy. He talked to researcher Bill Burns, the editor of UFO magazine, and Bill Burns described this conversation with George Hoover to George Norrie from Coast to Coast AM. And what Admiral George Hoover told Bill Burns was the biggest secret according to what the American Navy had found out. Very, very interesting story. They were talking about the Roswell visitors, and Admiral George Hoover said that these visitors were us from the future. They were time travelers. They weren't extraterrestrials. Now, other researchers and whistleblowers have spoken about the same thing, and this is fascinating in itself. But what Admiral George Hoover said the biggest secret really was, it had to do with the abilities and the power of the consciousness of these travelers. Because they were us from the future, what the military authorities had found out was what